Welcome back, ICM, to your very first code along for classes and objects. We are going to first look at some examples, and then we're going to build out a class together and talk about how we could add on to things in that class. So just some things for all of these code alongs. I am not going to move at the pace that I would usually move at while I'm in a class. I'm not going to do like the on-screen pauses and tell you like, go try this, like let me know when you're done. I will do my best to say like, this is a good time to pause, maybe go try this on your own, work this out in an editor. But you know, you are wonderfully smart people who, if you need to pause the video, please pause the video to set up anything you want to do. If you need to rewatch things, please feel free to go back and rewatch. You guys are on your own with this, so it is yours to use as will be most helpful to you. I would recommend when you have this video open, you might want 3 things open: video in a tab, slides in a tab, and an open editor window in a tab. We're going to open some samples, but then we are going to start from scratch, and I just want to make sure everything is available to you. So we left off with this idea of objects and classes, and we talked about classes being the template, the cookie cutter, the machine with like a very specific function that is going to create and spit out these objects. So this GIF is like doing a great job illustrating it. We have this like ice cream sandwich making machine. We have ice cream sandwiches coming out. Those are all the objects. It's making like dozens and dozens and dozens of these objects. And right now they're all like chocolate cookie vanilla ice cream. We could very easily start manufacturing different types of ice cream sandwiches, but this class, this machine, is always going to create an ice cream sandwich for us. So we're going to start by talking about classes and objects off the canvas. We're not going to worry about making a visual example like our bubbles. We're just going to have like a nice little chat about why this is useful, because the biggest thing for students is always convincing them that the things you are teaching them are a value add and that they want to learn this because it's going to make their life better. So I really hope some of you are English teachers. I kind of remember that some of you are. This is my biggest regret in things being canceled. I worked so hard on this reference, and I'm going to be so sad that you guys don't get it, and that you can't like see me deliver this in person. But we have 2 examples of 2 programs that function the same way, but that do 2 different things. So we have Charles Darnay, we have Sydney Carton, A Tale of Two Users. You guys are going to look at both of these, and you're going to choose your fighter. And by choose your fighter, I mean, which of these would you like to use if you had to make a class set of new users for your in-class social network? You are making a social network to keep students connected with you, with their schoolwork, with each other, to get like peer-to-peer help. Which of these do you want to use? So I would encourage you to look on your own so you can really spend time with this. I'm going to go through these so briefly. I'm going to open both of these up. Okay. So if we start with Charles Darnay, we see that he has made 1 user. And this user is a new structure that we haven't seen before. He just said user1 equals new user, Charles Darnay, morose, 25. And when we console log new user, we see down in the console that we get a user that prints out, and it's telling us the name is Charles Darnay, the country is France, the mood is morose, the age is 25, and it tells us that it's an object, which is all really useful. And if we scroll down, we can see where this object is being built, which I realize is very frustrating for us because we haven't done that yet. But we see it happening. And now, if we go over to Sydney Carton, we see that for Sydney Carton to make this, he had to declare 4 variables. He had to make user1 name, user1 mood, user1 country, user1 age, and then to console log that, he had to write everything out, and it does print in the console. It shows up. He is terrified. He's in France. He's 25. Whereas Charles Darnay is just morose in France, hanging out. And even though we don't know how to build these classes yet, I think we can probably see where this was going if you had to make another user. If I had to make another user here, I would need to say user2 name equals, user2 mood equals, user2 country equals, user2 age equals, over and over and over to get everything I want. If I had to do this for a whole class of students, I might have to do this like 34 times, which is just exhaustive. In our Sydney Carton example, even though you haven't used this yet, you might be able to figure out that you could just make a user2 variable And then you could say user2 equals new user, feed in some information, and it would give you a new user. So the benefit of like this class and object is it has multiple properties, multiple attributes that get all rolled up and hidden into this beautiful object that you can then use, manipulate, mess with, change, call on whenever you see fit. And here we're now managing 4 times 34 variables for a class set of people. That's a lot of stuff to manage. That's going to get really confusing and really hard to deal with. It's also just going to take up like so many unnecessary lines of code. So Sydney Carton and Charles Darnay is really going to win the day for us. And the thing that we're going to do all together is figure out how to build one of these classes. And then we'll kind of go back to some of the benefits and syntax of class. So benefits of classes are that we create those templates, we kind of roll everything up, we hide it together, we encapsulate it in one place. We're going to come back to classes on the canvas, but first, let's just practice building a class together. So this is a great time to get your editor out. I'm leaving the setup and draw function there, but I do want to stress that they're not like actually necessary in this moment. Those are really specific functions to P5 that specifically relate to using the canvas. If I'm not using the canvas, I can just like run JavaScript without those. So do what you see fit. We'll use setup just because we're familiar with setup. But I'm going to start by building out my class. Now, generally in JavaScript, a best practice is that if you're not putting classes and functions in a separate JavaScript document, which we're going to talk more about shortly, that you are declaring them underneath everything else in your code so that they're just like tucked out of the way and you can call them in other places. In different languages, this might look different. For example, in Python, functions and classes need to be written before they can ever be used. That's a language by language thing, and y'all can figure that out when you move other places. I just don't want you to think this is correct if you move on to other courses later. For every language, that is. So for writing our class, we start with the word class the same way declaring functions, we start with the word function. And then right after class, we give our class a name. And the best practice, like with variables and functions, we've always said we don't capitalize. Classes, we normally start with a capital letter. And that's really just to differentiate it from functions and variables, because you could technically use the same word for a function, a variable, and a class and be talking about 3 different things. This is how we distinguish between the two. So if I was trying to make users for a cool new social network, I could call this class user. And then, like function definitions and conditionals and other things we've seen in JavaScript, JavaScript needs to know where does the definition of this function begin and where does it end. And we tell it that with those curly braces. So I'm going to start a curly brace, and then I'm going to end a curly brace. And then inside of here, everything between, right now, my lines 9 and line 12, that all is part of my class definition. It's all things that are going to be specific to that class. Now, classes in JavaScript, in order to be built, we have to tell them how to be constructed. And we do that with this special function called a constructor, which is already like built in and taught to the program. So to make a constructor class, or to make a constructor function, you literally just write the word constructor. And then you have your parentheses. And then you also need to tell the computer where does the constructor definition begin and end. So curly brace, the end. Now this is part of where things get a little bit confusing. When we build out classes, they're going to be talking about properties of specific objects, and different languages use different words to do that. In JavaScript, we use the word this. So if I know that the users that I am building out need to have a name and an email to sign up, I would need to give each one a name. So I could put this.name, and I could also put this.email. Now, this.name and this.email, the this, which I realize like you're going to hear me saying this so much and it sounds so confusing, this just represents that object. So when we make our first one, it's going to be a little bit more clear. But every object will sub in for this. Name needs some type of value, and so to start this, we're going to imagine that I am making a user for myself. I'm going to test myself. So I'm going to say this.name is Courtney, and I'm going to say this.email is cmorgan@twillsbronx.org. And now I have a user and I have a class. If I wanted to make a user for myself and test that I'm like in the system, I can make a variable called, let's call it Courtney because it's me. And I could set Courtney equal to, and let's do this in the setup because this is what we're used to seeing, a new user. So note our syntax, we're saying Courtney equals new space user, capitalized just as it is. And right now we see that it's missing the parentheses, which tell us that it's a constructor, just like how we need the parentheses when we're using functions. So I'm gonna pop my parentheses in there, and then I'm gonna console log Courtney, and I'm gonna see what spits out. So when I hit play, I should see that in my console, it tells me my name, it tells me my email, and it tells me my constructor. I can also access my name and my email individually by saying Courtney.name. In this instance, Courtney is taking the place of this. And if I say Courtney.name, it will access just my name. If I say Courtney.email, it will access just my email. And already this could be useful for me if I'm building a program that maybe I only want to have access to. I could say that if Courtney.name equals Courtney, then greet me with a special message or like announce that I'm the teacher somehow. Now this is all fine and good, but if I wanted to make one of these for Jose, and I go down here and I say Jose equals new user, and I try and print out Jose, we're gonna see that Jose's information is the same as my information. And that's because right now in my constructor, I'm telling it that every single time I make an object, the name should always be Courtney, the email should always be cmorgan@twillsbronx.org. Maybe there are different things that I want to be able to control about this user. So if I want to be able to control things, I could pass in arguments the same way that we do in functions by declaring them in those parentheses and then utilizing them in my code. So name starts with an N, I will use an N. Email starts with an E. I could say this name equals N. This email equals E. And maybe that there's something that everyone in this social network has in common. Maybe I'm making this for ICM, so we're all in the ICM course. I could say this course equals ICM. Because that's not being fed into my constructor, there's no way for them to change it. So now if I run this, first we're going to get some errors, because it does not know, it's undefined. I did not tell it what Courtney or Jose should be as a user. But now I can say, for new user Courtney, my name should be Courtney. Name has to come first because it's expecting to get that first in my list of arguments. My email is here. And for Jose, his name, is Jose. His email is jolivares2@strongschools.com. I don't think com is right. Sorry, Jose. It's right for now. So now when we play this, and I print out Jose's information on line 8, I see that his name is Jose, I get his email, and I also see that he's in the course ICM. And same as before, I can access Jose's name individually. I can also access his course, even though I didn't feed it through because it's always there. And I can also print out my name or course or email, which I'll print out my email. And I can access and update and use all of that information without having separate variables for everything. This is just a really basic example. If we were doing this in class or in like a PD setting, we would spend way more time on this. But I would encourage you at the end of this code along to maybe just pause, think about how you could add on to this. What are other things that you might want to know about someone if you were building a social network for ICM? Can you practice adding things on here that are maybe the same for every object, and maybe things that are going to be different for every object? And once you're ready, come back and we will do a little bit more talking about how object syntax works and what objects are going to look like once we move to the canvas. Good luck!